Welcome to the Future of Field Service podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Going into 2022, we know that the challenges that exist around recruiting, hiring, retention, employee engagement, and satisfaction are top of mind regardless of the industry or geography someone is operating in. I want to share with you today a panel discussion from a session that I moderated late last year, featuring executives from Intel Corporation, Fujitsu, and Hewlett Packard Enterprise, discussing some of the unique and creative ways that their organizations are tackling this challenge. I hope you enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here with you all today with a wonderful panel. We're going to have a discussion on this panel about the skills gap, the labor shortage, the talent gap. You hear it referred to in many of these ways. And talking about some of the actions companies can take both on the people side and on the technology side to address this challenge. So as James said, my name is Sarah Nicastro. I am a part of IFS, and I actually run a thought leadership resource called Future of Field Service. So I interview folks regularly about their business transformation journeys, and I'm thrilled to be here with four great guests today. So I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves briefly. Cedric, do you mind going first?
Yeah, sure, Sarah. So hello, everyone. My name is Cedric. I'm currently working at Intel Corporation, so as a processor company, and specifically in the branch of Intel called Internet of Things Group for autonomous driving cars. So all the latest fancy stuff there. And in our, and so a little bit about me. So I have basically 10 years in engineering, in the last 10 years, much more on the business side, where currently I am running the operations of the business unit. So okay. That's it.
Thanks for being here. Newland?
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Newland McKelvey. I'm Core Delivery Director of Fujitsu, so responsible for day-to-day delivery of the managed services that are provided to a major public sector body. And actually, prior to that, was responsible for the setup of Trader Support Service, which is the customs intermediary supporting organizations dealing with the sort of outcomes of Brexit, need for those things to be handled in a new way. And I've been with the company a few years. Actually, James, who's just been speaking, and I were talking last week, and I realized I joined Fujitsu before James was born, so just one of those quirks of life. But yeah, nice. So glad to be here.
Excellent. Krish?
Hello, everyone. My name is Krish Venkataraman. I'm part of Hewlett Packard Enterprise, which you know needs no introduction, those in the IT industry. And I'm looking after the Asia Pacific and Japan customer operations, global operations, and the customer experience part of that. That's my area of focus. I'm based in Singapore. Like what Newland said, maybe I joined this company before James was born as well. So that was back in 1988. So it's a long time. Thank you. Very happy to be here. I look forward to a great session. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kshitiz?
Thanks, Sarah. So hello, everyone. My name is Kshitiz Agarwal, and I'm currently working as a self-employed consultant where I'm helping small businesses with their clean energy transition. I'm a former site service director with Mitsubishi Power, and one part of my role is to develop the teams for these energy transition and prepare our training strategy. So I'm really looking forward to learning from all of you and sharing some insight. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. So as James said in the introduction, this recording is going to live on for eternity. So we're going to make sure we make it a good talk. So I want to start off just by everyone weighing in a bit on, how is the labor shortage or skills gap impacting each of your businesses? Okay, so let's just kind of level set with, what what is this issue meaning to you in your organization? So we can just go around again, if that's okay, Cedric, if you could start.
Right. So yeah, so currently labor shortage is quite an interesting topic at Intel because every world area has actually a different dynamics. So Intel being based in the West Coast, we have tremendous talent pressure on the West Coast of the US. And also in quite specific spots where you have other IT or technology companies such as Ireland or Munich area or Singapore also. I mean, quite a few spots, Malaysia, for example, where we have competitors that are present also because we build the ecosystem around and we grow. There are also factories around ours over time. And so essentially right now, there is a little bit of a challenge for skills, specifically experienced individuals. And and at every level, from the engineer that is starting until the senior vice president that are being taken from one competitor to the other. So it's touching us at every level.
Okay. All right. And Newland, what about you?
Again, with Fujitsu and sort of echoing Cedric, it's a global issue for a company like ourselves as well, where we've got global delivery centers as well as regional centers. And the experience and skills shortage is impacting across the board, and that can be in deep technical specialisms, but equally in more generic skills like experienced project managers in development or service setup and transitions, equally down to simple things like or more simple things like actually even standing up a support center. Now there's just such a huge demand across the piece. And a lot of competition out there, and it's getting that right, getting the right people in, but equally retaining and actually encouraging people from, years ago, instead of going to IT, I find ourselves doing other things that we'll probably talk about later.
Sure. Yep. Okay. Krish?
Yeah, this is great question, and good input also from Cedric and Newland. The way I look at it is also, I used to wonder at times, on the one side, we will, take any country's numbers. They'll say there is X number of people unemployed. At the same time, there are Y number of openings, roles that are there that they can't find the people. So be it in any industry, be it in manufacturing, technology, customer service industries, anywhere, the gap more, I see that as the fit between what we need and what we have, and whether the people are willing to see themselves as a different person. For example, there's one quote I wanted to share with the team. Mark Anderson predicted in 2012, hey, you're going to have two sets of jobs. The jobs that somebody will tell the computer what to do, and then the jobs that the computer will tell them what to do. Okay. So these two divides, however, we all know in our whole day, different times, we act in different roles. There is one task I do what my computer tells me to do, and 10 minutes later, I'll be doing a task that I tell the computer what to do. So it's not always this, one side or the other. Now, but the challenge here is, how do we accept that? How do we internalize that? And how do we have the people recognize that and play that correctly? That's where I generally see some, gaps as well, because I may have good set of candidates, good set of pool of people, but they are not having that right skill set and right training to do the right thing. So how do we bridge that gap is definitely a thing we will be talking further, but that's how I see as the gap.
Okay. All right. And Kshitiz?
So basically I'm from energy industry, so I had a little bit different perspective and different state of a challenge. So right now, because the energy industry is going through the massive transition, so it is a kind of an imbalance between the skilled workforce as well as adaptation to the required or new skills due to digitalization. And this is happening, from my experience, this is happening because of two reasons. One is specifically because of aging workforce. And secondly, it's because there are not enough new or young people coming into the industry, especially to the blue collar job that had created a massive gap between the industry. So as Chris said, it's right, matching the skills as well as matching what is available in the market is right. But at the same time, I think the perception of the industry or perception of the job taken throughout the market or throughout globally, basically, is also important in this, play a key role in the skill gap right now we're facing.
Yeah. So I'm looking, as we're talking, I'm looking at my long list of questions and realizing there's no way we're going to get through all of them. There's a lot to dig into related to this topic, and it's one of my favorite topics to discuss. So instead, I'm going to try and make sure we get to 4 questions at least. And then if we have time, we'll come back to some of the others. So the first thing that I think is interesting is really having a conversation around what we're calling this issue, right? So you hear it referred to as the labor shortage, the talent gap, the skills gap, the experience gap, right? And those are all really different things. Okay, and so I think the one of the first questions we have to ask ourselves, for each of our individual businesses, is what is this problem to us? Which of those is it, right? So what I mean by that is, I think historically, now we're on a panel with people from different industries, different geographies, right? So we have to kind of, look at things from a high level. But I think, historically, most organizations for most roles are accustomed to hiring based on experience, right? And so I think one of the biggest issues with this topic is that I don't know that I believe we have a skills gap or a talent gap. I think there are people with skills and there are people with talents. They just may not have the experience that we as organizations are accustomed to be able to hire based on, right? And so, I did a presentation on this topic a few weeks ago, and it was around controlling the controllables, okay? Because, the labor shortage, the actual statistics around how many people are available to hire in any given location isn't something you can necessarily control. But your perspective on this as an experience gap versus a talent gap versus a skills gap, those are things you can control. And I think the first thing we need to do is take a look at our historical recruiting and hiring practices and ask ourselves, do we need to adjust to today, right? So if we're always looking for people with X number of years experience, is there a way to achieve the same outcome by looking for different criteria in the folks that we're looking to hire? So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just, your thoughts on that and any changes you've made within the business or have thought about making within the business to sort of shift from looking for experience to looking for the skills, traits, characteristics, abilities you need, and finding ways to provide some of that experience. So that's the first point. Does anyone want to volunteer to go first?
So yeah, I can start. First of all, the thing is, we cannot generalize the skill, experience, and the talent. It depends on the geographies. It depends on the industry. In some industry, it is required to have more experience than the other because it might be life and death situation. So we cannot generalize that. But coming from the industry where I am right now, traditionally and currently as well, the priority is always given to experience than young members. Because of this gap that we are facing between the aging and the young people right now, companies have started looking at a different perspective. One of the perspectives is as simple as looking at the talent or new workforce from the global perspective rather than a geographical location. That is the one way they are tackling it. Another way they are tackling it is engaging through the indirect recruitment process, which is more they get engaged with the new graduates right from the time in their university, and then recruit them and train them. Apart from that, from my experience, there's we all heard about the apprenticeship program, especially in Germany. Those programs actually, over the period and history, they proved themselves very, very effective way, especially in the infrastructure or mechanical industry or electrical industry. And I believe more and more organizations right now are coming up with these apprenticeship program and the graduate programs to bridge that gap so that they can train the people or train the new entrant right from the base foundation level to the place where they need them to be at to bridge this gap.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I certainly was not suggesting we just put, people that are not capable of a certain job in role. It was exactly what you're saying. How do we become more creative about ways to sort of farm talent instead of just looking for it ready-made, right? So things like what you're saying are exactly my point, which is, it really comes down to, as organizations, we may need to do more work than we've done historically because we just don't have a wealth of people to bring into the business that have 5-10 years experience. So we have to look at how do we give them the training, the experience, the time they need to be capable, but take some more responsibility for doing that. Yeah. Go ahead, Newland.
Yeah, so I was going to build on what's just been said, because I think, in terms of apprentice programs, grad programs, etc., those have all proved, across many industries, including IT, be it power, whatever, really, really beneficial. But one thing that we've been doing over the last few years, and not just ourselves, but I've seen it elsewhere, is when we look to recruit or appoint new roles, we don't just look within, I'll call it the professional communities for want of a better description, but actually look even internally outside that. For instance, so when you're bringing somebody, and I've seen examples where someone from a finance background has become a manager or a development team over time. And the reason for that is that the good thing is that they know the company. They've maybe got a few years. They understand, if you like, the mechanics of the organization. So they don't have that as a learning curve. And then it's supporting those people from sort of those diverse non-technical backgrounds who have good management skills to actually become managers in an area where we desperately need, someone to come along and really, help build teams up, etc., where they've got the skills. It's just bringing that, bringing the technical level up as well to support that. And I think that's helped us several times in the past where we've had gaps.
And a lot of the conversations that I've had on this topic, Newland, kind of echo that approach, which is if you find the right, whatever you want to call them, core skills, soft skills, you can provide the technical knowledge needed in many cases to complement that. So that kind of opens up doors for you to look in different industries, different, areas, things like that. I recorded a podcast on this topic at an event I was at last week. And, one of the things I think, Cedric, you said, this isn't a challenge for just entry-level workforce. It's a challenge all the way up. But one of the points that came up in that conversation is that a lot of younger workers, they don't come into a role and plan to stay there for 20 years. They want progression. So if you can kind of restructure the way you look at your recruiting and hiring practices and figure out how to map them up within the business, it gives them the progression and growth that they want, but also helps you when it comes to filling, roles above just the entry level. So Cedric, what have you seen in terms of ways that Intel has adapted here?
So Intel is a very interesting company. Before being at Intel, I was working at Emerson Electric, which was a very industrial company. And now being at Intel, I see a very culture shift. mostly maybe because Intel is West Coast based, where all the ecosystem and the startups is over there. But actually, as much as an industrial company, you had people that were staying 5-10 years on a job. When I was a younger professional, I was seeing that. Nowadays, when I am in Intel, actually, you see, well, the person is expected to stay maybe 3, maximum 5 years on a role before moving on. Now, what's happening is that also I have to be honest, Intel has a huge competitive advantage is that we have a huge skills and talent pool within our employees. To give you, we are a rich company. And to give you an idea, the quality department of Intel is about 1,000 people, 800 of them have PhDs, okay? So just when we speak about talent pool, that's what we mean. To have people with PhD and MBAs, standard. You cross them everywhere almost. So this is, we have already, so when you take these people, you can almost, have them going from one job to the other without too much problematic. Now, that said, you still have to retain these talents. And it's not because you have great foundations, as I was saying, but you need also to close the talent or the gap that is a problem that you have to solve on that moment. And compared to other companies at Intel, we have an internal volunteering program that we call gigs, okay? So how does it work? Actually, and also this is also coming from the West Coast, is basically you have for every 5 years, over 5 years, you accumulate vacation days. And at some point you go on sabbatical, meaning that for 5 weeks in a batch, you go out and you come back, you still have a job. Now, what's happening is during these 5 weeks, somebody needs to take care of the job. And so we create gigs, what we call gigs, where the people basically, somebody that has nothing to do or is interested maybe in this role can apply, so as a temporary gap filler, if you want, and test the job itself. And maybe as a person moves on to the next job, basically somebody is kind of seen what's going on in that role and had, to be experienced. 5 weeks is not tremendous experience. He's not going to break anything really. But still, you get a look and feel about what it means. So are you feeling ready for taking on this job, maybe in another organization? Intel is also, we have the advantage of the size. So we have a huge internal job market that address many, many people. And so in order to fill these gaps or talents gap that we might have, this is one of the way by doing these so-called gigs, temporary work, that is outside of your standard job that can help on filling that gap. Something that I've never seen in any other companies that I've been into before Intel.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point, Cedric, which is, you mentioned the approach at Intel is far different than that of Emerson, right? And so I think you have that a lot with companies that are more on the modern, innovative type of culture versus, something that has more legacy. And I think that's where these type of conversations become very important, because that doesn't mean that, someone with a completely different culture can just mimic what Intel is doing. But I think this is an area where, companies need to look at what others are doing and maybe just have some thoughts, right? So it doesn't need to be a blueprint for how they go back and do it, but just some different, new, fresh ideas to bring in and to try some different things. Because I think we can all agree that, this problem demands more creativity than perhaps we've leveraged before. So Krish, I want to come to you and ask, certainly if you have any insight on kind of where you're finding new candidates, that's fine. But the other part of sort of the recruiting side is looking for new places to find folks and maybe changing the criteria upon which you use to hire a bit, but also making sure that you are speaking the language of the people you're trying to hire and making sure that the roles are appealing to the candidates that you are addressing today. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about any changes that have been made or any work that's been done to make sure that as you're recruiting, you're offering, an appealing opportunity for people that you're looking to bring into the business.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. So let me start off answering that in a couple of parts. First one, the way we look at things is, as you know, Hewlett Packard Enterprise operates in 190 countries. So there's no one size fits all for us. Okay, the challenges are different in different geographies. So what we are doing as a starting point is see a need to rebrand the way we sell a role to the candidates. What appeals in different geographies we need to be cognizant of. For example, in some geographies, people want to know, how am I contributing to the vision of the company? How am I part of the success story? How am I part of the community contribution that we're making? So that's very important for them. We also want to take the value proposition. It's not just a job. It's not just a role. We take the total value proposition of being part of Hewlett Packard Enterprise in different dimensions. So it's beyond just compensation and benefits, looking at the career advancement, work environment, culture of the organization, and also the ability for an individual to shape the way they want to take their career development, personal development forward in any direction they want. So that culture of the organization promotes that very well. People could walk across and do a shadow assignment in another part of the organization, no barrier. People could ask for a stretch assignment. Somebody could be maybe in finance, but they want to go and do a stretch assignment in marketing. Vice versa, or some other areas, even intergeographic stretch assignment. So all those facilities are there for the people to take advantage of that, and it also helps them to shape, determine, take control of their own career path and career direction, and nobody is telling them what to do, but the options are there. Right? So that's the real important cultural shift and the framework that we have in place to support that. Now, in terms of how we look for also candidates, we need a good, diverse set of candidates. So we talk about the diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we want to make sure that is practiced at all levels of the company. And actually, it's also part of my key result area. Okay, every year I'm measured on how many of those mix I am managing and continuously nurturing those mix of different things. It's not just gender diversity, cultural diversity, and various other forms that we don't differentiate between how people want to express themselves or how they want to identify themselves, but how they can be part of the team and complement each other. And we have a thing called employee resource group, which is an internal community that's really supported right from the CEO level to grow this further.
Yeah.
At the same time, we also shifted our focus a little bit. We're using automation, for example. Quite often, this what called unconscious bias comes in the way we are writing something or the way we are expressing something. So using a lot of automation to identify them very early, filter them out. For example, the way a job description is written should be very, very neutral, location neutral, gender neutral, all sorts of neutrality is being brought in consciously into that. Even the employee value proposition, all the external, internal communication, there is a lot of effort and focus also drives that. And people feel that, hey, I'm part of this organization that, do not differentiate this and values diversity. So we see this definitely helping in both as well.
Yeah. So you brought up a couple really good points. And I did a podcast a while back with the woman who runs talent globally at Tetra Pak. And it was all about the move to outcomes-based hiring, outcomes-based recruiting and hiring. So I think it's a great episode for anyone to go and look up, but it's this idea of, well, there's more to it than just job descriptions, but what you just said about job descriptions, there's this idea of, are we putting words or things in here that are going to have people leave themselves out that may be a really good fit. So are we, limiting ourselves? How do we kind of get to the root of what is the outcome of this role and leave it with strictly things related to that so that you get a good broad pool of diverse candidates to apply, right? The other thing is this idea of, and this probably sounds very obvious, but you would be shocked how many companies aren't doing it, which is, when is the last time you updated or revisited your employee value proposition? Do you know what is important to candidates that are coming into the workforce right now? It's not just about money. It's not just about collecting a paycheck. They want to feel heard. They want to be empowered. They want to feel they're making a difference. They want to feel a part of something bigger than themselves. They want opportunities for career development. They want flexibility, right? So starting to look at, are we providing those things, and are we articulating that we're providing those things, right? Because what matters to candidates today is different than it was 5-10 years ago, right? So this kind of segues us into the next topic I want to talk about, which is retention. So Cedric, if you can kind of start off and just share, this is kind of a natural segue because you bring people in with sort of this value proposition, right? And then it becomes a game of making sure that they are engaged, empowered, that they're, having a fulfilling employee experience so that they want to stay. So what's your take, Cedric, on retention?
So retention is quite, it's quite a vast topic. And over the years, essentially, to keep employees, companies are, at least at Intel, we are trying many different areas and trying to tailor actually to where even the person is in his life cycle. From the young engineer that comes into Intel, that wants to revolutionize the world, that has plenty of energy and coding and things like this, that wants, to do this, to the younger adult, later adult that wants to start a family. And so with programs such as parental leaves, where basically I want to take care of my kids, they are born, and so on and so on, but without the fear of losing your job at the same time. Then for later, when you are more experienced, then basically it might be, to go into an expert track or into a leadership track. So you have, for example, at Intel for that, your salary, many times, and if I go back to my Emerson Electric experience, many times if you want to grow, it was just vertically, okay? Just go up, up the ladder. More people you manage, the bigger you are, and da-da-da-da-da. At Intel, actually, there is a difference between a leadership track, which is exactly the traditional, the more people you manage, the better, and da-da-da-da-da, and you get the salary increase. But there's also the engineering track. So where you belong, basically you become a specialist, from the young engineer to a principal engineer to to a fellow who is on standards committee that is influence standards directions at the international level. And that gets you, and the grading is actually the same thing as the leadership. It doesn't have the same name, but essentially you can get, you have the same grade, we call that grade internally, but you can be a senior vice president and just be a simple engineer. But because you are basically helping on steering committees for international standards, you are equipped, you are at the same level or considered as the same level of grade as maybe a senior vice president. So by creating these two racks, these two possibilities for more experienced people to grow into what their career aspire them, basically you get much more retention and you adapt to basically the different stages that a person might be. And of course, and you have plenty of internal trainings that is quite standard in every company. You have another thing that actually, and a little bit provocative that we are doing also at Intel that I've never seen before, is what we call returnship. So basically when a person, left the job because they want to raise their kids, and come back 10 or 15 years later saying, well, now my kids are grown up, they don't need me anymore, so I would like to go back to the workforce. Well, you still need the period of adaptation, and we call that returnship, where we allow people that have been potentially 10 or 15 years out of the workforce to get started again. And this is something that I've not seen in many other companies that I've been to.
I love that idea, Cedric, especially because, when you look at the impact that COVID had on women in the workforce, and I mean, just how we need to look for ways to help, right? And to, build bridges for them back in and all of those things. I'm conscious that we are going to run out of time, and James is going to get mad at me because we haven't gotten to questions. Newland, so here's what we're going to do. James is going to bear with us for just a moment. Newland,
Okay.
If you can answer the same question about retention, and then for Krish and Kshitiz, I have one other question, and then we'll get to audience questions. So Newland, what are your thoughts on retention?
So for people coming into the company new, we've set a strategy that retention starts with onboarding, and that onboarding starts right at the first interview or first of the recruiting engagements and continues throughout, so that by the time somebody lands in the company, they've actually experienced both interface with their management. They'll have a buddy, they'll have they'll have had different events, and that's the external recruitment. Equally, going back to Cedric's sort of analogy of moving people about internally, we do have sort of something similar. It's called career pathways, and equally, it's if someone's keen, then wants to move into a role from that. Moving role internally can be quite a step change, and again, it's the similar principles, because you don't want someone coming into a team and finding it's the wrong role. So the first thing is what Cedric's outlined. Equally as well is then making sure that onboarding process and induction and everything else really works for people, because and then the final thing is also the concept of career, which Krish and others have outlined, is it is broader than the vertical. It's
right.
Very much you're looking for cone-shaped people. No, you're looking for people where they've got a number of areas of expertise and more general knowledge, but rewarding that as well, and recognizing that. So it's not just a vertical hierarchical pay and reward, but actually rewarding them what they bring, and the outcomes that we talked about earlier are critical to that.
And this is where the complexity comes in, right? Because you can understand what's important to your talent pool that you're looking to hire, and you can tell them that you're doing all of those things, right? But if they come in and that is not the reality, then you have no chance of keeping them, right? So you have to be marrying, the work on the recruiting side with, really making sure that you're evolving the employee experience and offering people, a rewarding place to be so that they do want to stay. Okay. All right. We're going to try and do this in 2 minutes. You guys each get 1 minute. And I want to ask, Krish, we'll start with you and then we'll move right over. I want to ask, what role has technology played in, alleviating, assisting, helping with this challenge?
Okay. So in terms of technology, the basic thing, for example, let me give an example of automation. When we use automation to redesign the workflow, and the operating model becomes so elegant, makes the flow much more agile, collaborative, and also non-hierarchical, and it empowers the people at the right point to make the right decision, so that there is no need to go back and forth. So clearly, the technology has played such a big role here, and it can be taken, leverage for many other areas in a similar way. And we find that to match that. So what does that mean? Is we need education people with different set of background, with a different set of knowledge and skills to take the full advantage of that. Because one of the challenge we always find is, even though the technology is there, the people are not really ready to go and take full advantage of that. So if we have that cultural shift, and the technology enablement with the right people at the right qualification, the skill set, I think we can make the best out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And Kshitiz, your thoughts on technology?
So technology is playing a vital role right now, especially in mitigating this skill gap. What we are talking since the beginning, we can call it skill gap or experience gap or talent gap, but it's playing a vital role. So, for example, I was involved in developing a training program using AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, to train the people on the health and safety side while working on the site. And similarly, there's also in energy industry specifically, there's an increased use of robotics, whether it's a remote control or autonomous robotics, to do those jobs which not require the human interaction. And it makes not only it bridges the gap, but it also makes a safe working environment, which is more important at this moment especially for the infrastructure industry. And from the point of view of the retention, again, technology is again making a huge difference. As Chris rightly said, it bridges the gap, that hierarchical gap between the different people, and it enables different people from one role to another to easily shift from one role to another role, and one job to another role, which they consider as a progression in their career path. So yeah.
Yeah. So I always look at technology on the tactical side, the strategic side, right? So tactically, what are the ways we can leverage technology to help alleviate areas of this challenge, right? So is our current workforce optimized and fully utilized, right? So when you look at scheduling and things of that nature, are we appropriately using the people we do have, right? And then, automation, are there aspects of work that are not value add, right? That we can automate to allow more capacity for our workforce to do really important things. I think a lot about knowledge capture and knowledge management. You have such a volume of expertise leaving the workforce. Are you capturing that knowledge so it can continue to be leveraged? And then, the point got brought up about augmented reality and different, training tools to get people able faster to get into the workforce and to be impactful. On the strategic side, Krish, I completely agree. And it's obviously a completely different conversation, but the idea of what new roles need to exist, what reskilling and upskilling do we need to do to make sure that we're leveraging technology strategically as a part of our value proposition. Okay, so James, come on in and yell at me for going over. And I'm sorry, but it's such a good conversation. We should have allotted more time.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I'm not one to get mad. I'm not going to shout at anyone. Let you guys do your thing. That was great. I'm just conscious of our next speaker, Rainu, is probably waiting in the little pre-check and worried that I'm not there. So we've got time for one question, I think. We'll give it a hard stop after 5 minutes, just so I don't panic her. So the question here from Christine, are there any recommendations as to the split you should have between retained employees versus outsourced contractors resourced to deliver digital innovation?
I will take this one if I may, because this is actually at Intel it's a hot topic. Not in every areas of the company, but in our in this. And most of the time, what we are doing is that we are looking at whatever we are doing is a position a long term, and what we mean by long term is 3 years. Okay, so will there jobs to be done for the next 3 years for a person to come on board? If yes, we open a job. If not, then we look at a contingency work contractor, contingency worker. And some areas of some areas of Intel, we have very few contingency workers. In others, which is much more customer project based with very short time turnarounds, then basically we use much more because we cannot predict really what is the next skills that the customers will ask us to support them. And so it's very much becomes, very customer-oriented adaptation. But it doesn't mean that at the strategic level, we see, contingency workers or outsourced workers cost a lot more. So there is also all the time strategic reviews internally to try to find the right balance. We never, to be honest, we haven't found it yet. We look for it. This is maybe the same ground, but we are all the time trying to balance between the business objectives on one side, but also having a much more stable headcount or strategic gaps that we might need. And it's always a balance between the two. And for that one, we try to do our best, but sometimes it's not that easy with business circumstances.
Anyone have anything they want to add there? Just quickly.
I suppose the one thing I would add, and I'll let Krish dive in, is that oddly enough, the lens that Cedric applied slightly different in our type of organization, where we're actually looking at whether it's an area where we're growing and expanding versus one where if we have a gap, but in reality it's maybe got it's a legacy area. And if it's where area we're growing and expanding, we want to bring in very specialist skills to help recruit, retain, and actually develop our own internal workforce. But the ultimate aim will be that. Whereas if it's legacy, we'll focus more on moving some of those people on and using contractor or external staff to sort of supplement. So we've got that sort of moving wheel of people internally as well. Krish, sorry, I'll hand back to you. I'll let you speak.
Thank you. Quickly, one area we look at it, James, is transformation. Okay, organizational transformation. Organizations go through continuous transformation. It's not always that the organization may have the right skills, knowledge internally to do the transformation. They need that external help to do the transformation. And then the internal core organization can continue to move on to the new platform and operate, but the need to shift them, to move that. That's where I think the external sourcing would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed the panel conversation, and we will have plenty more content coming to you this year on this topic. In the meantime, you can find more by visiting us at futureoffieldservice.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well as Twitter at The Future of FS. The Future of Field Service podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.